All I wanted was to spread a little Christmas cheer, but when I hung my lights, the HOA decided I was breaking their rules. Within weeks, they tried to evict me. Big mistake. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you know exactly how bad it can get. There's something magical about December in my neighborhood. The air smells like pine and burnt cookies, kids ride their bikes in puffy jackets, and every house looks like a Christmas card, thanks to our beloved HOA, of course. Yeah, the Homeowners Association. The group that promises beauty, order, and community. Basically, the neighborhood police, but with clipboards and opinions. Still, I loved it here. Quiet, safe, clean. The kind of place where you wave to your neighbor even if you don't know their name. My wife and I bought this house 5 years ago, right before Christmas, and ever since then, decorating for the holidays became our little tradition. Nothing crazy, some lights on the roof, a snowman family in the yard, a glowing reindeer that looked more confused than festive. It wasn't about showing off. It was about fun. But in our neighborhood, fun had rules. And those rules had a name, Martha Reynolds. Martha was the HOA president. A retired school principal with the personality of a tax audit. The kind of woman who could spot an unapproved mailbox color from 2 blocks away. Always in her beige cardigan, always holding her little clipboard like it was a weapon. If the HOA were the army, Martha was the general. Don't get me wrong, at first, she was polite. Every time we met, she'd smile that tight, rehearsed smile and say things like, "We appreciate how well you're maintaining your property." Which really meant, you better keep it that way. The rest of the HOA board followed her like she was the queen of Christmas, ironic, since she seemed allergic to joy. Anyway, that year, I was especially excited. Work had been stressful, the kids were older now, and I wanted to make Christmas feel special again. I bought some new lights, nothing wild, just a few synchronized ones that blinked to Christmas music. You know, that fun neighborhood stuff everyone enjoys. The first night I set them up, everything looked perfect. My house was glowing, music playing softly, kids laughing, the air smelled like cinnamon and hot chocolate. For once, it felt like a holiday movie scene. Then I saw Martha. She was standing at the end of my driveway with her clipboard, squinting like she'd just spotted a crime scene. "Evening, Martha," I called, cheerful. "Just getting in the spirit." She gave me that tight smile. "Yes, well, we do appreciate enthusiasm, as long as it stays within the HOA guidelines." I laughed, thinking she was joking. Spoiler, she wasn't. She pointed at my reindeer. "Are those approved decorations?" I blinked. "Approved? It's a reindeer, Martha. It's Christmas. Santa kinda needs him." Her expression didn't change. The HOA decor policy states that all holiday installations must be tasteful and consistent with the neighborhood aesthetic. I glanced around. My neighbor had a 10-foot inflatable Santa on his lawn. Across the street, someone had a full nativity scene lit up like Times Square. But sure, my reindeer was the problem. Still, I didn't want trouble. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Got it. Tasteful. Consistent. Reindeer friendly." She wrote something down on her clipboard and walked off like she'd just solved a crime. I remember standing there, hands in my pockets, watching her go and thinking, that woman needs more eggnog. I laughed it off that night. Didn't think much of it. It was just Martha being Martha. But deep down, something told me this wasn't the end of it. Because with Martha, it never is. She loved control. And people like her can't stand when someone brings a little color to their perfect beige world. So as I stood under the glow of my Christmas lights, sipping cocoa and admiring the house, I had no idea what was coming. The complaint letters. The warnings. The fines. I didn't know it yet, but my simple joy, the lights, the decorations, the laughter, would soon become her biggest problem. And the war of Christmas would begin. That weekend, we went all in. The weather was perfect, cold enough to feel like Christmas, warm enough to keep your fingers from freezing to the ladder. My wife was playing Christmas songs on a speaker, my kids were running around arguing about where Santa should go, and I was just trying not to fall off the roof. We'd been collecting decorations over the years, and this was the first time we decided to use all of them. Warm white lights around the roofline, multicolor ones on the bushes, a glowing reindeer in the yard, and yes, my personal favorite, Santa himself, sitting proudly on the roof like he just landed after a long night. It was chaos. But it was beautiful chaos. By the time we were done, the whole place looked magical. Not over-the-top Vegas style, but bright, cheerful, and full of personality. The kind of display that made you smile without blinding your retinas. That night, when we finally turned everything on, the neighborhood lit up. Literally. Kids came by on their bikes, mouths open like they were seeing fireworks. One of my neighbors shouted from across the street, "Looks awesome, man," and another added, "Finally, some real Christmas spirit around here." Even the grumpy old guy 2 houses down gave me a thumbs up, though that might have just been him scratching his head. Still counts. I felt good. Proud, even. My family stood there admiring the glow, cocoa in hand, Christmas music softly playing through the open window. It was one of those rare, perfect moments where everything just feels right. And then, she appeared. Martha Reynolds. The HOA president. The self-proclaimed guardian of community standards. She walked down the sidewalk in her usual beige cardigan, clipboard tucked under her arm, lips pursed so tightly you could slice cheese with them. I tried to stay positive. Maybe she was coming to compliment us. You know, what a lovely display, or something normal people say during the holidays. Evening, Martha. I called, smiling. Getting into the holiday spirit? She stopped, squinted at my roof like she'd just seen a UFO, and said, "I see you've made quite the display." Yeah, I grinned. We went all out this year. The kids love it. Makes the house feel warm, you know? She didn't respond. Just started scribbling something on her clipboard. My wife whispered, "Is she writing you up for Christmas lights?" I shrugged. It's Christmas. What could she possibly complain about? Martha circled the reindeer like a detective at a crime scene, took a few notes, then looked up at the Santa on the roof. Her face twisted like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Is that secured?" she asked. "Well, yeah," I said. "Santa's not going anywhere." She jotted something else down. You know, the HOA does have restrictions on roof decorations. Safety concerns, and of course, aesthetics. Aesthetics? I repeated. It's Santa Claus, not a satellite dish. No smile. No laugh. Just that same pinched expression. She finally looked at me and said, "You might want to review the HOA's holiday display policy. Page 12. Then she turned and walked away, her clipboard tucked like a weapon of mass irritation. I just stood there, blinking in disbelief. My wife looked at me, trying not to laugh. Page 12, she said. What is this, the Christmas Constitution? We both cracked up. I figured Martha was just being Martha, grumpy and bored. I didn't think much of it. But as her beige sweater disappeared around the corner, I couldn't shake this weird feeling. Like maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something bigger. Something I'd eventually call the Great Christmas War. A few days later, I came home from work, grabbed the mail, and noticed a thick white envelope with those 3 cursed letters in bold print, HOA. Now, usually HOA mail means one of 2 things: either they're reminding you to trim your bushes, or they're about to ruin your day. Spoiler, this was option 2. I tore it open right there in the driveway, and the very first line nearly made me laugh out loud. Violation #112B, non-approved exterior decorations. Immediate removal required. I actually read it twice because it sounded like something out of a dystopian novel. Non-approved decorations? What did I do? Summon Santa illegally? My wife saw my face from the window and called out, "What happened?" I held the paper up like it was radioactive. Apparently, we're in violation of Christmas. We both stood there reading the rest of the letter. It was written in that overly professional HOA tone, you know, where every sentence sounds polite but feels like a threat. Your property has been found in non-compliance with community display standards. Please remove unapproved items immediately to avoid daily fines. Unapproved items? The only things out there were lights, a reindeer, and a plastic Santa that's been in our family longer than Martha's been terrorizing this neighborhood. So, being the responsible homeowner I am, I decided to check the HOA handbook. I flipped through all the sections and appendices like I was studying for a law exam. And guess what? Not a single word about colored lights. There were rules about paint shades, mailbox height, even how tall your grass could be, but Christmas decorations? Nada. I actually laughed. Okay, I told my wife, this has to be a mistake. Maybe Martha typed the wrong address or something. She raised an eyebrow. You really think that? Yeah, I said, still optimistic. No sane person would find someone over Christmas lights. So, I did what any rational person would do, I ignored it. I figured if I didn't give it energy, it'd go away. Oh, how naive I was. A few days later, another letter arrived. Then another. Each one sounded angrier than the last. The HOA went from friendly reminder to official warning faster than Santa down a chimney. And the kicker? Martha started showing up more often. I'd catch her walking by in the mornings, stopping to take pictures of my house with that same grim expression like she was gathering evidence for a trial. At one point, I waved from my porch, just to be friendly. She didn't wave back. She just wrote something on her clipboard and moved on. That's when I realized, she wasn't done with me. No, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was personal. I could practically hear her voice in my head, rules are rules. But I wasn't about to let the Queen of Christmas killjoys win that easily. So, I told myself, just hold your ground. It's your property, your decorations, your right to enjoy the holidays. But man, I had no idea how far Martha was willing to go. Because ignoring that letter? Yeah, that was my big mistake. At first, I thought Martha would cool off. Maybe she'd realize how ridiculous it was to pick a fight over Christmas lights. Maybe she'd even, I don't know, relax a little. Yeah. No. If anything, she turned it up a notch. It started one Saturday morning. I was outside, untangling extension cords, when I noticed her beige cardigan of doom approaching from down the street. Clipboard in hand. Phone camera ready. She didn't even say hi this time. Just marched straight onto my lawn like she was inspecting a nuclear site. Good morning, Martha, I said, trying to sound casual. She didn't look up. Instead, she squatted down near my sidewalk and started measuring. I kid you not, she had one of those little metal tape measures, pulling it across the edge of my grass. Everything okay? I asked. She sighed. Just making sure your lawn edging meets HOA standards. I blinked. It's December. The grass is dead. She ignored me and snapped a few pictures of my house, from the front, from the side, and even one at a weird angle like she was gathering evidence for an FBI case. Then she turned to me and said, also, your lights are a bit excessive. Some neighbors have complained about the brightness. I looked around. The only neighbors nearby were kids building a snowman and a guy across the street who waved at me like, don't mind her. Excessive brightness? I said. They're Christmas lights, not a stadium. Martha pursed her lips. Well, the HOA has a responsibility to maintain visual harmony. Too many colors can be distracting. Distracting from what? I asked. The joy of the season? She didn't respond. She just scribbled something on her clipboard and walked off with that I'm the law posture. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about decorations. This was about control. And Martha? She was loving every second of it. Over the next week, she showed up 3 more times. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes at night. She'd walk the perimeter of my property, taking photos like she was scouting for illegal activity. Neighbors started noticing too. Some avoided eye contact, scared to be associated with me, probably afraid they'd end up on her hit list next. But others? They'd whisper support when she wasn't around. One guy leaned over the fence and said quietly, "You're not the first, man. She fined me for having wind chimes last summer." "Wind chimes?" I asked. He nodded. Said they violated the noise policy. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an HOA. It was a dictatorship with a Christmas vendetta. And Martha was the self-appointed supreme leader. Then came the fines. Not just one, multiple. The first was for unapproved lighting arrangement, $50. The second, improper yard decor spacing, $75. And the third one? Oh, the masterpiece. Holiday inflatables exceeding height limit, $100 fine. That one really got me. Because guess what inflatables she was talking about? Santa. The same Santa sitting proudly on my roof. I stared at the paper, speechless. Apparently, my inflatable Santa violated a height restriction for exterior decor not to exceed 12 feet. 12 feet. I checked. Santa was 10.5. So now, she was fining me over inches. It was insane. Every time I opened the mailbox, I half expected to find another fine. Maybe violation #117C, excessive holiday spirit detected. I tried to talk to the HOA board about it, but that was a joke. They were all just Martha's backup singers, nodding along while she sang the tune of Control. That's when I started keeping track, dates, letters, photos, everything. Because something told me this was just the beginning. And if Martha wanted a Christmas war, well, she was about to get one. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of cold, gray day where even the coffee feels tired. I grabbed the mail like usual, flipping through bills and flyers, when I saw it, another envelope stamped with those 3 cursed letters. HOA. I sighed. What now? I muttered, already bracing myself. I opened it, and this time, my jaw actually dropped. Failure to comply with HOA decoration policies has resulted in fines totaling $1,000. Non-payment may result in property lien or eviction. I read it twice. Then a third time. Eviction. For Christmas lights. I actually laughed out loud for a second, that kind of tired laugh you do when you're too shocked to be mad yet. My wife walked in and asked, "What's funny?" I handed her the paper. Apparently, we're about to be homeless, because of Santa Claus. She read it, her eyes widening. They can't do that, right? I mean, technically, I said, rubbing my temples. They can try. And that's when something inside me snapped. Not in a dramatic way, more like a quiet, simmering realization that Martha Reynolds had officially lost her mind. So, I did what any normal, peaceful person would do. I marched over to her house. Her front yard looked like a magazine cover, perfectly trimmed hedges, a single wreath dead center on the door, and not a single decoration out of place. You could almost smell the rulebook from the sidewalk. I rang the bell. She opened the door wearing that same beige cardigan and a smile so fake it could have been trademarked. "Ah, Mr. Taylor," she said. "I assume this is about your violation notice?" "Yeah," I said, holding up the letter. "This one says I owe $1,000. For Christmas lights." She nodded calmly, like she was explaining parking rules to a teenager. "Yes. You've received multiple warnings and have failed to comply. The board voted to escalate penalties." Escalate? "Martha, you're threatening eviction. For decorations." She tilted her head slightly. "We have rules for a reason. This isn't Las Vegas." I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to maybe say she was joking, but nope. Her face was stone. "You can't just make up rules as you go," I said. "I checked the handbook. There's nothing in there about colored lights or Santa height restrictions." She gave a little smirk. "We interpret policies as needed to maintain neighborhood standards." Interpret policies. That's when it hit me, this wasn't about lights or reindeer or anything else. It was about control. Martha enjoyed this. She wanted to remind everyone that she ran the neighborhood. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, I'm not trying to cause trouble. It's Christmas. The kids love the lights. Nobody else seems to mind. She crossed her arms. We've had complaints. From who? I asked. She smiled slightly. That information is confidential. Of course it was. I took a deep breath, thanked her for her time, and walked away before I said something I'd regret. But as I walked back home, rage bubbled beneath the surface. Not the explosive kind, the cold, calculating kind. Because now, this wasn't just some grumpy HOA president on a power trip. This was a personal battle. So that night, I sat at my desk and pulled out every letter, every violation notice, every ridiculous photo she'd taken. I made a folder labeled Martha's Madness. If she wanted to play games, I'd play too, but smarter. I'd dig deeper. Find out how much power she really had. And maybe, just maybe, turn that power against her. Because if Martha Reynolds thought she could bully me out of my home over a few Christmas lights, she was about to find out she'd picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by a mountain of papers, violation letters, and a growing sense of disbelief. I'd had enough of playing defense, it was time to go on the offensive. If the HOA wanted to threaten me with fines, liens, and eviction, then I was going to find out exactly what gave them the right to do it. So, I pulled out the thick binder I'd gotten when I first moved in, the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The holy book of suburban control. I hadn't opened it in years. It still smelled like printer ink and pretension. I flipped through the pages, scanning for anything about Christmas lights. Nothing. Not a single mention of holiday decor, lighting, or seasonal displays. Just page after page of legal mumbo-jumbo about fence heights, paint colors, and approved landscaping materials. And then finally, I found something. One single clause buried deep in the fine print. Homeowners are expected to avoid decorations that pose a nuisance or safety hazard. That was it. One vague, meaningless sentence. No time limits. No color restrictions. No wattage rules. Nothing about Christmas lights at all. I leaned back in my chair, grinning. So Martha had been bluffing. The fines, the threats, all of it. Completely fabricated. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the clause. Then another of the $1,000 fine letter. Evidence. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was energized. If the HOA thought they could invent rules out of thin air just to bully homeowners, they were about to get a taste of their own medicine. I started a spreadsheet line by line. I compared real HOA policies with the so-called violations they'd sent me. By the time I was done, I had a list of at least 6 instances where they'd broken their own rules. That's when the plan started forming. Expose the corruption. Not through shouting or vandalism, but with proof, precision, and patience. I'd make every move by the book, but in a way that cornered them completely. First, I'd attend the next HOA meeting, quietly, calmly. I'd ask questions they couldn't answer. Then, I'd collect stories from other neighbors, anyone else who'd been fined for nonsense reasons. And if things got serious, I'd take it all public. Because one thing was clear now, this wasn't just about Christmas lights anymore. It was about power, and the people who abused it. And if the HOA wanted a fight, I was finally ready to give them one. It's funny how fast word spreads in a neighborhood. One minute you're just that guy with the glowing Santa on the roof, the next, you're public enemy number 1. By the end of the week, everyone knew about my little feud with the HOA. Some neighbors would nod at me with quiet support, whispering, "Good for you," someone had to stand up to them. Others suddenly crossed the street when they saw me coming, pretending to check their mail. You could practically smell the tension in the air, like peppermint and paranoia. Then came the notice taped to my mailbox in bold red letters. Emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance for all residents. Oh, I knew exactly what that meant. Martha was about to spin her story. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, you know, that overly fancy little building no one actually uses except for HOA drama. The moment I walked in, I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Martha stood at the front, dressed in her usual beige power suit, clutching her clipboard like it was a weapon. She cleared her throat and began. "Neighbors, we have a situation," she said, blaring in my direction. "Certain individuals have chosen to disregard community standards, putting our neighborhood's harmony and property values at risk." I could almost hear the capital letters in her voice. She went on about uniformity, order, and preserving the aesthetic vision. You'd think we lived in a five-star resort, not a cul-de-sac with cracked sidewalks. When I tried to speak up, she shut me down fast. "This is my meeting," she snapped. "You can make a statement after we address the violations." "Oh, don't worry, Martha, I plan to make plenty of statements later." See, what she didn't know was that my phone was recording everything from my pocket. I'd learned that when you're up against someone who plays dirty, you keep receipts. And thank God I did, because then she said it, the thing that turned everything around. She looked right at the board and said, "I personally don't like those colored lights. They make the neighborhood look uncoordinated. I've always preferred white lights, they show harmony." There it was. The truth. This whole war wasn't about safety or rules or community image. It was about one woman's personal taste. I could barely contain my grin. I just sat there, nodding along like a model citizen while inside I was thinking, gotcha. When the meeting ended, the divide in the neighborhood was even clearer. A few people muttered under their breath that Martha had gone too far. Others still looked scared, afraid of being fined next. But me? I walked home calm, almost excited. Because now I had the smoking gun, Martha herself admitting it wasn't about any rule, just her own control issues. The next move was simple, use her own words to bring her whole operation down. If I thought things would calm down after that meeting, I was dead wrong. The next morning, I walked out to grab the mail and nearly dropped my coffee. 3 new envelopes, all stamped with that dreaded HOA logo. Each one was worse than the last. Violation #119C, excessive illumination. Violation #128, unauthorized roof display. Violation #121F, failure to remove holiday materials within specified timeframe. Translation, you're still making Martha mad. By the time I added it all up, the fines totaled $3,500. $3,500 for Christmas lights. And if that wasn't crazy enough, the last letter said, continued non-compliance may result in property lien or eviction proceedings. Eviction? For Santa and a few reindeer? You'd think I had turned my front yard into a nightclub. At that point, I knew it wasn't about rules anymore, this was personal. Martha wanted to break me. That evening, I was sitting in my living room watching a movie with my family when there was a knock on the door. 2 police officers stood outside. "Sir, we got a call about a noise complaint." Loud music and flashing lights. I just stared at them, then motioned to the window. The lights were off. The neighborhood was dead quiet. You could have heard a snowflake hit the ground. One officer sighed. "Yeah, we figured. Sorry to bother you. We've been getting a few interesting calls from this address lately." I smiled. "Let me guess, Martha Reynolds?" He nodded slightly, trying not to laugh. "Have a good night, sir." That was the moment I realized this wasn't enforcement anymore. It was harassment. But here's the thing about me, I don't lash out. I plan. Every fine, every notice, every conversation, I'd been saving it all. I had an entire binder full of evidence. Photos of the lights, which were completely harmless. Recordings of Martha making her personal preference comments. Copies of every bogus violation letter, each with a timestamp. I was building a case. Quietly. Patiently. See, Martha thought she had all the power. She thought her clipboard, her fake smile, and her made-up rules made her untouchable. But she didn't realize I was done playing defense. I was done trying to reason with someone who only wanted control. So while she was out there counting light bulbs and measuring reindeer height, I was setting up something far more powerful, something that would end her little reign of terror once and for all. I wasn't just decorating for Christmas anymore. I was preparing for Judgment Day. And this time, Martha wouldn't be ready for the lights that were about to shine on her. By this point, I'd had enough Christmas spirit to last a lifetime. I wasn't just dealing with an overzealous HOA anymore, I was dealing with a full-blown power trip in heels. So I made a call. Not to the police, not to the HOA, but to someone who actually understood how to handle bullies with clipboards, a lawyer. After a few searches and some recommendations, I found a guy who specialized in HOA abuse cases. Yeah, that's a real thing. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd suffered under these so-called community protectors. When I walked into his office, I carried 2 big folders stuffed with every letter, photo, and recording I'd collected over the past few weeks. I dropped them on his desk like I was slamming down a winning poker hand. He flipped through the papers, eyebrows rising higher with every page. After a few minutes, he leaned back in his chair and said something that made my whole week. They're not just breaking their own rules, they're breaking the law. Turns out, Martha and her crew had gone way off the HOA's legal boundaries. Fake fines, made-up rules, harassment, false claims, all of it was a violation of state housing codes. Can we fight it? I asked. He grinned. Oh, we're not just fighting it. We're going to bury them in paperwork. Within days, my lawyer filed an official complaint with the County Housing Authority, citing harassment, fraudulent fines, and misuse of HOA funds. Yep, apparently, some of the fine money wasn't even being logged properly. But that wasn't all. He also filed an injunction, a legal order that forced the HOA to stop issuing any more fines or threats until the investigation was complete. And just like that, Martha's power trip hit a brick wall. The letters stopped. The threats stopped. The clipboard disappeared. For the first time in weeks, my mailbox was empty, and it felt glorious. A few days later, a county inspector showed up at the HOA office with official documents. You could practically hear the panic ripple through the neighborhood. Martha tried to play it cool, of course, walking around like she wasn't sweating bullets. But the smile was gone. The whispering started again, only this time, it wasn't about me. It was about her. People started asking questions. Where's all the money from the fines going? Why are we being investigated? Did Martha really make up those rules herself? And slowly, one by one, the same neighbors who used to avoid eye contact began waving again. Some even stopped by to say, "We're rooting for you." It was small, but it meant everything. For the first time since this mess began, I felt like I wasn't alone. The legal wheels were turning, and Martha's little empire of control was cracking at the seams. Christmas lights still twinkled across my yard, brighter than ever, not as decoration anymore, but as a symbol. Because now, the light wasn't just shining on my house. It was shining on her lies. If karma ever had perfect timing, it was now. About 3 weeks after my lawyer filed the complaint, a thick envelope arrived in every homeowner's mailbox. It had the County Housing Authority's seal stamped right on top. You could almost feel the neighborhood's collective curiosity buzzing through the air. I opened mine and nearly laughed out loud. The letter started with, "After a formal investigation, the County Housing Authority has determined that the HOA has engaged in unauthorized and unlawful enforcement actions, including false fines, threats of eviction, and misuse of funds." Boom. There it was, black and white, official as it gets. By sunset, the neighborhood group chat was exploding. People were screenshotting the letter, forwarding it, calling each other half shocked, half thrilled. Turns out, this wasn't just about me. The investigation revealed that Martha had been running her own little side hustle for years. She'd been quietly issuing fake violation fines to homeowners and funneling portions of the payments into bogus maintenance projects that didn't exist. No wonder she was so obsessed with her clipboard, it was her personal ATM. One guy down the street found out he'd been fined $400 last year for a damaged fence he never even owned. Another woman realized her landscape fee had gone straight into Martha's private account through a fake lawn service invoice. The outrage spread like wildfire. An emergency HOA meeting was called that very night. This time, it wasn't in the clubhouse, it was outside, on the community lawn, because half the neighborhood showed up. When Martha arrived, she didn't have her usual confident stride. No clipboard, no smirk, just a tight smile that screamed, "Please let this be a nightmare." The meeting started with the HOA treasurer standing up and reading a statement from the county. He confirmed everything. The HOA had no legal basis for any of the fines. All eviction threats were illegal. And worst of all, funds had been misappropriated. The crowd erupted. People started yelling, demanding refunds, demanding resignations. Some even called her a thief right to her face. Martha tried to speak, but her voice shook. I was only trying to maintain standards. Someone cut her off by stealing from us? The board took a quick vote right there in front of everyone. Result: Martha Reynolds removed as HOA president. Effective immediately. It was the first time I'd seen the neighborhood truly united, not out of fear, but relief. The next morning, another letter went out, this time from the newly restructured HOA board. It apologized to residents, confirmed all unauthorized fines were voided, and promised transparency moving forward. And there it was, in writing. All prior violations and fines issued to the narrator's name are hereby nullified and removed from record. Finally, my name was cleared. When I stepped outside that evening, neighbors waved, some even clapped. Kids pointed at the glowing reindeer in my yard like it was a victory flag. And you know what? That's exactly what it was. Because after all the lies, harassment, and fake threats, truth had finally won. The neighborhood was free. The HOA was cleaned up. And Martha? Let's just say, she wasn't feeling too harmonious anymore. That Christmas, our street looked like something straight out of a movie, and not the kind Martha would have liked. For the first time in years, the neighborhood actually felt alive. No tension, no fear, no one peeking through curtains wondering if their mailbox was half an inch too tall. Just families outside, kids running around with candy canes, and lights, so many lights. I decided to go all out. If I was gonna celebrate, I was gonna do it right. So I threw the biggest Christmas party the neighborhood had ever seen. We had cocoa stands, cookie tables, hot cider, music, and laughter echoing down the street. Neighbors who used to whisper "keep your head down" were now stringing up lights together and arguing about who had the best inflatable Santa. It was beautiful chaos. And this time, no one cared about uniform white lights or brightness levels. It was color everywhere: reds, greens, blues, and golds lighting up every rooftop. One of my neighbors, old Mr. Jenkins, walked up with a big grin and a piece of cardboard that read "Martha Free Zone." He hung it right on the community sign at the street entrance. Everyone cracked up. Even the new HOA president, who was actually a decent guy, came by with his wife and said, "Well, I'd say this is officially HOA approved." That gave me an idea. I went inside, grabbed a few leftover LED strips, and built a glowing banner across my yard. It said, in giant red and green letters, "HOA approved, check twice." When I plugged it in, the whole crowd burst out laughing. Someone shouted, "Looks like Santa's on your side this year." It felt perfect. All the stress, all the frustration, all the letters and threats, it melted away in that one moment. The same lights that once caused all the trouble were now shining brighter than ever, lighting up a street full of happy people. And maybe the best part? Word around the neighborhood was that Martha had moved out quietly a few days after being voted out. Apparently, she couldn't stand to live where she'd lost control. Fitting, right? As the night went on, I stood in my driveway, sipping hot cocoa and watching the lights dance across every house. I couldn't help but laugh a little. All I'd ever wanted was to spread some Christmas cheer, and in the end, that's exactly what I did. Except this time, it came with a little side of justice. You know, when I first moved into this neighborhood, I thought an HOA was supposed to protect people, keep things tidy, organized, fair. I figured it was all about community spirit and looking out for each other. Turns out, sometimes the people who talk the most about order are the ones causing the chaos. Looking back, it's almost funny how a few Christmas lights turned into a full-blown war. But honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. Because through all the stress, fines, and fake rules, I learned something huge. HOAs are meant to protect property values, not crush community spirit. Rules have their place, sure. But when they're used as weapons instead of guidance, that's when you have to stand up. You can't let power-hungry people bully you behind the excuse of policy. And fighting back doesn't always mean shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes, it just takes truth, persistence, and a little bit of light. In the end, that's what really won. Not anger. Not revenge. Just staying calm, staying smart, and letting the truth shine bright enough for everyone to see. Now, when I walk through the neighborhood, it actually feels like home again. People smile, wave, and decorate however they want. The fences of fear, yeah, they're gone. Literally and figuratively. The lights still go up every year, brighter than ever. And every time I plug them in, I think about that first night I hung them, how something so simple turned into something that changed everything. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about standing up for what's right even when everyone else is too scared to. But, just when I thought the peace had finally settled, no more drama, no more threats, I opened my mailbox one morning and saw it. A single white envelope. No return address. Just that same old HOA logo stamped in the corner. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, coffee in hand. Then I laughed, slow, tired, but ready. Because if there's one thing I've learned in this neighborhood, the drama never really ends. Some people never learn, but at least now, I know how to deal with them.